Years ago, my earliest PC rig was an old HP laptop. I could barely run Half-Life 2 at the time, and relied mostly on source mods when it came to playing new games. I played a variety of mods back then. A couple of multiplayer-focused stuff, like Action Half-Life 2 and Firearms Source. Some artsy projects, like Radiator and the original version of the Stanley Parable. And mods that took assets from Half-Life 2 and repurposed them for unique gameplay experiences, like Research and Development and Water. Water is a 2013 source mod made by the Half-Life Short Stories group. They've made another mod, Human Error, which I haven't played, but I know it takes place in the Half-Life setting. Water is its own story, and a good deal of its assets are proprietary, but the game does use elements from Half-Life 2 and possibly Counter-Strike's Source for its environment art, as well as a few other assets. Water stuck with me all these years, and it's something I still like to bring up to people because I find it such a unique game. I haven't properly explained what Water is. Water is a third-person adventure game starring a goddess that happens to be the personification of water, who is also a mermaid. This game takes place in an unspecified town, which I'm gonna call Innsmouth because everyone here is a fish person. According to the intro, the world was made by three goddesses: air, fire, and water. Air and fire chose not to engage with life, basically the biblical notion of creation in this context. Yet water chose to keep in contact with life. She influenced the minds of the fish people, and they expressed their admiration for their goddess by casting their dead into the sea. Water took these tributes as food. At first, fire stayed in the skies in the form of the sun, but eventually the fish people learned to harness fire, and so the goddess came into contact with life. Her influence was more powerful than her sisters, and people eventually stopped offering tributes to the sea. Water realized her supply fell through, and decided to leave her subterranean lair to investigate. The first chapter teaches you about your basic abilities and how to engage with NPCs. You swim from your subterranean lair to the nearby city, which, lucky for Water, depends on a canal system not unlike Venice. Everything you do is in the service of moving through the city to reach the mysterious new Reverend. She rules the town with an iron fist, and she may know the answers for why Water's food supply has gone dry. Water's swimming controls are pretty good. She moves at a moderate pace, and you can increase the speed with shift like you would sprinting on land in any other game. You can change the elevation of your swimming with the jump and crouch keys. One of the first things you'll learn to do in the game is phase into a liquid form, and that moves even faster than sprint swimming. You jump by sprint swimming while pressing the jump key to quickly rise up to the surface, and you breach it like a whale or dolphin. Sometimes you need to move across dry land, and that requires you to climb up. You need to hold the jump key to finish a climbing animation, and it sells that sensation you get from leaving a body of water and losing that sense of buoyancy once you're in the open air. Water presents an interesting perspective as a player character, because she's an inversion of what kind of character you'd normally expect to play in a video game. Most games feature characters who are primarily terrestrial, and swimming is a secondary mode of travel for them. Water is a sea goddess, and always needs to be in the water. There are moments where you need to travel on dry land, and the game will bombard you with alerts, much like other games would do so if you were swimming too long and didn't catch your breath. The world takes on a darker vignette around the corners, and you can hear Water desperately gasping as she claws her way across the cobblestone paths. Once you run out of breath, you lose a portion of your health, and the breath meter is partially refilled, but still runs out dramatically fast. And this will continue until you either reach water or suffocate completely. Sometimes you'll reach barriers like grates on drains that will prevent you from crossing. This isn't a problem for Water, because she can phase out of her material form and turn into a literal body of water, so you can slip through the grates. This is her first unique ability, and later on, you'll use that ability to traverse through pipes and solve puzzles. Since Water can't stay on dry land for too long, she needs to communicate with the fish people to help her with some of the puzzles. There's an overall depressing air that lingers over the town ever since the new Reverend arrived. She brought with her the Word, a series of prayers that she uses to oppress the townsfolk, and allows her most devoted to use them to enforce her will. When you talk to someone, a dialogue tree pops up. You use left and right to switch between options, and more questions can appear if you ask what's going on. There's an interact option that lets you point at objects in the world, and that helps you gain insight from the fish people, but more importantly, it's also how you get them to solve puzzles for you remotely. Sometimes you need to win the hearts and minds of the fish people in order to get what you want, so you need to listen to their stories and figure out how to help them. Sometimes you need to charm someone with your singing in order to win them over. You get a harp later in the game, and you can sing anyone to charm them. Some people you can trick into falling in the water and saving them, and that results in winning their adoration. It's always funny to see fish people almost drowning in this game. When you use someone to solve a puzzle, you can command them to do stuff, like turn valves and open doors, or move objects around the world to affect another character. Sometimes, you'll end up possessing a fish person, and you need to herd them somewhere. This is where the controls change from the usual WASD scheme that you expect from a PC shooter, and instead, you use the mouse to click wherever the character needs to go, like in an RTS, or more appropriately, a point-and-click adventure game. This is a really clever shift, because it creates a comparison in your mind with both types of movement. It uses the feedback you get from each type as a reflection of the level of control you would have from being in your body versus if you were just using someone as a puppet. WASD's feedback is instantaneous and barely registers a thought. Mouse clicking requires you to wait until the subject finishes their animation before you can relay the next set of instructions. Sometimes you'll have to fight someone, and the game goes into a turn-based battle mode, like what you'd expect from a JRPG. Each side has a set number of actions displayed as a meter underneath their health. You can perform different types of moves in the game, from offensive, like clawing at your target, to defensive, like withdrawing in the water to avoid attacks and restoring a portion of your health. This could have been really badly done, but it's also cleverly used here, because you're not rushing down enemies with your best attacks. Your action bar forces you to treat fights like a puzzle of sorts, by figuring out which actions will help you either disable or win over your target while mitigating damage. The enemies not only have offensive attacks, but they can heal themselves and undo your charms as well. It's only used sparingly in the first few chapters, but it comes back in full force by the end. It's a good way to show combat in a game that isn't normally focused on violent actions. One instance near the end even combines a combat mechanic with a follower mechanic, by having someone you won over earlier fight alongside you. The overall tone of the game is a dark fairy tale, and back when I reviewed it on ModDB, I described its story as a mix of Ocarina of Time and Okami. A trio of goddesses create the world and then abstain from contact, and a goddess forgotten by the everyday people. What I find charming about the game is that even though I said the tone is a dark fairy tale, the game doesn't take itself too seriously. It's very tongue-in-cheek in some moments, and the Half-Life Short Stories team isn't above toilet humor. The humor doesn't take away from the game's atmosphere. It's there to brighten up a town that's devoid of any color. Speaking of which, I love the art style of the game. Everyone's got an ugly cute quality to them, even Water. While she is the most visually appealing character in the game, besides the crabs that is, her proportions are still too gangly compared to what you'd expect a mermaid to look like. I think the art style works for this game because it's a mod made by a small group. It takes a whole studio of people to make realistic looking characters not fall into the uncanny valley. But in Water, the fish people are stylized enough visually that it doesn't really ruin the game to see some of the animations glitch out. The flashbacks are all done in a cut-up style, and they remind me of Dave McKean's work, or the Angela Anaconda cartoon. I first learned about Water on a podcast about Half-Life mods years back, when they interviewed the Half-Life Short Stories group. In the interview, they explained that they applied a sepia filter to the environment to give it that black and white look. Because the environments are so drab, they make Water stand out where she would normally look boring in her muted greens and browns. This also applies to any areas in the map submerged in the water. Again, they're not vibrant, but the presence of color creates a stark contrast to the cold monotone look of the surface, and that goes hand in hand with the sensation of suffocating water experiences which is on land. This conditions the player into associating dry land as a toxic, oppressive environment, and you want to be in the water as much as possible. On land, all you can do is crawl and suffocate. In the water, you're free to swim as you please, and the speed and ease of swimming really sells that. Water's puzzles are pretty good. Some feature water pipes you can phase into that'll take you to different areas of the map, and you need to change the flow of the valves to bring you to your desired location. There are no brain busters, but the presentation makes up for it. The guys behind the mod know how to teach players new mechanics early on in the game, and then bring those mechanics back later down the line, but with some added complexity. Also, some puzzles stand out just for the fact that they incorporate toilet humor. I don't think I've ever played another game where you hide in a barrel and people take it to an office and take turns drinking you, and then getting drunk means you can control them, so you need to guide these people to the toilets to piss you out. That's probably someone's fetish, but trust me, it's more goofy funny here than I'm making it sound. Hey, check it out. Is that a motherfucking Majora's Mask reference? It turns out that the Reverend is actually your sister Fire. She's deathly afraid of water because there's some prophecy in the legend that water will come for fire just like fire will eventually come for air. She devotes all of her resources to putting water down, from guards blocking your path or attacking you, to importing the Ichthyosaur from Half-Life 2 over to serve as a water hazard in one set piece and a boss in the following section. This is what I mean when I said I liked how the Half-Life Short Stories team repurposed Half-Life assets. Fire Sprite has several stages, and some of them actually call back mechanics you use to solve puzzles in the game. You phase into a toilet, throw bottles at her at one point, and then command crabs to attack her. By the end, Fire will ask you why you're so adamant with chasing her. This is where you have the option to choose your reason for fighting, and I think this is where you can affect the ending of your game. In my first ever run years back, I think I chose Stop Oppressing the Fish People choice, but this time I chose to defend the Crabs faction and their desire to have fish people dump trash back into the water again because it entertained the crabs. It's like Neptune commanding humans to pollute the 7 seas to ensure the fish don't get bored. I think this is the dog ending of the game because you end up marrying the king crab. If you're looking for a good story, I can't say you'll find it here. The backstory is there to explain why you're traveling through Innsmouth, and Water's character feels detached. Yes, you help people in the city, but in the end, you're using them for your advantage, and there's no clear motivation for why you're doing any of this besides saying you're hungry. Hell, some puzzles have you putting fish people in mortal danger, just so you can save them to win their support. It's pretty fucked up. The flashbacks have some good vignettes to serve as flavor for the setting, but you just can't help some characters with their situations. Instead of choosing to help the suicidal king crab with bringing back pollution to the waters, you can say you'll try to bring back tacos to the crabs, and I never knew how to solve that. There are boxes throughout the game that contain tacos, but I couldn't carry them in my inventory like I could the bottles in the early game, or the keys I needed to open a locked door later on. I just broke the boxes, the tacos would scatter around in the water. Also in this setting, crabs love tacos. This is that tongue-in-cheek humor I told you about earlier. I've played a few 3D adventure games before, and I can say that Water is the only one where I thought it took advantage of being a 3D game. Telltale adventure games look fine, but there's really nothing to do in them that would require them to be 3D. Dreamfall is another 3D adventure game I've played in. It's also one that doesn't really need the 3D aspect to work, because the combat and stealth sections aren't that good, and if you took them out, you'd still have a solid experience. Everything about Water, from its navigation, to how you interact with the environment, to solving puzzles, makes good use of the engine and its physics. The 3D presentation and level of interactivity in the game is such that it actually grounds the adventure game logic you experience from time to time. Once you learn about phasing through pipes, you need to use one to reach a key, but someone's using the toilet at the end of that pipe. So you go to the next stall and throw the toilet paper over so that guy can use it and move off. And that would be simple to do in a point and click game, but here they add the physicality of the action by having you throw it over to the guy. Water is a weird and charming game. It's impressive to see a small group create a third-person adventure game within an engine that's been primarily designed to be an action-focused FPS. You can play it today if you want. Check out hlssmod.net for the Half-Life Short Stories group's site. You can download Water there, as well as other mods. Check out Last Zombie as well. It's a send-up to walking simulators, and it was done in 2013.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Du weißt ich nicht.
You can download Water's OST there as well, and that's what I'm using for the background music in this video. Just know that if you install Water, you're going to need to install Source SDK Base 2007 as well. The Short Stories group's last project was called From Earth, and it was something I was looking forward to, but I think it's on ice now. The last post I saw on their site talked about repurposing the assets they developed into making another game, and I think that one's going to play like an XCOM. It's too bad since From Earth was going to be an even more ambitious game than Water, with a language system you had to learn to communicate with the aliens. I guess you're the alien since it's their planet, and a fighting system, but maybe it's for the best that didn't happen. If you want to see what a fighting system looks like in an adventure game, play Dreamfall, and then realize why no one ever does that.
Great movement. Good. Block, Zoe, block.
I really want more people to experience Water. It's not that long of a game. All my footage was from a 2-hour session, and that included me having to reload a save when I got stuck taking a plunger over to a clogged toilet to piss myself out. Please, play Water.